Hi. So, I know this is in 1984. I know, big uproar. But, today I want to talk about my favorite poem that has been my favorite for at least a couple years. And that poem's name is Ozymandias. Without further ado, I want to get straight into this because it really is a good poem in my opinion. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast, trunkless legs of sand stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown, wrinkled lip, and sneer of cold command tell that sculptor well those passions red which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, king of kings. Look at my sculpture, yet mighty in despair. Nothing besides remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, a bone and level stands, stretched far away." Now, in under a minute, I presume, I have read to you an entire poem, and that most of people can probably understand at least a little bit of it, which I think is good, okay? It doesn't need to be super, I don't need to think that much outside the box, okay? I need to be a little bit smarter for that. But it also, I just think it's a well-read poem. But before I get into that, I really do want to talk about all the key players. So the person who made this poem is Percy Shelley, who is one of the most important poets of the Romantic period during this time, because this was made during the Industrial Revolution, specifically in the year 1818 in England. And during this time, although the Industrial Revolution has made staggering progress in things like modern medicine, helping people get more jobs, and essentially giving people more resources, people also noticed how unclean everything is and how we are destroying nature, essentially. So all the poets during this time, at the beginning of the 19th century, to the end of the 19th century, they're all about how we should preserve nature, and that we are a part of nature, and that God made nature for a reason. All right? Now, the thing about Percy Shelley is that despite the fact that he is married, had lots of children, especially since he died at 29, which is kind of tragic, died in a boating accident, and was married, he was an atheist, which is unheard of at this time, especially from a poet, where the whole idea is that we need to give back to God. And he made the argument that it is not the atheist's fault that they believe these things. All right? Which he got ridiculed for that because it's the 1800s, and I mean, atheism was kind of outlawed, but not really. There's no law during this time, in English law specifically, that says that you can't be an atheist, but you were definitely ridiculed, labeled as a pagan, and you weren't allowed to go anywhere. And what was outlawed was teaching people about atheism and saying, and especially giving it positive things. You couldn't do that. So it is remarkable that for a guy who was not well liked during this time, it's very well liked today, especially since this is his most favorite poem. He is also known as the husband of Mary Shelley, who is a writer of Frankenstein. Spoiler alert, it's kind of boring. Alright, I'm sorry. It looks boring. And tragically, he would die at the age of 29 in a boating accident. He would drown. And his wife would do a very weird thing, which is literally take his heart, put it in a box, and keep it in that box until she died, and then people had to remove it from said box. Now I don't have a whole lot of grief, but I don't think that's normal. You know, I just a hot tip. I don't think that's normal. If anybody's watching this and doing that, that's not normal. You need help. Now, this being 1818, all of Britain was in this Egyptomania phase where they all wanted to know more about Egypt and liked the exotism of Egyptian culture, especially its pharaohs and how they had gold and stuff. And that started because they understood the Rosetta Stone after taking it from Napoleon, because everything leads back to Napoleon, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you're French or not. But most of my audience is Canadian, so unless you're a Quebecer, I got nothing to say. But yeah, like they would, especially rich people, they at this time they would literally take the wrapping of mummies and they would keep it in their houses. You know, like used for dead bodies that was used on said bodies that are thousands of years old at this point. They would take it and they would rub it on their skin because they thought that it would grant them a longer life, which no, it would just give you diseases. That's all it would do. But yeah, that's the backstory of why he made this essentially. Um, Now Ozymandias is a real person. Ozymandias is Ramesses II, also known as Ramesses the Great. He's he's also mentioned in the Bible, specifically in the Moses story, where he's the guy who murdered all the Jewish babies by throwing them in the Nile, which personally I don't know that's true. That story has a lot of inconsistencies with real life, especially with the building of the pyramids, which in that story it's showed as how Jewish people made it, which in real life they did not. It was made by free Egyptian workers, like freed people. So that, just to give you context, so this guy's kind of character. He went into a lot of military campaigns, and a lot of them were stalemates. But he was a really good propagandist. He would always show these stalemates as victories, which gave him a lot of support with his population, to the point where even during his lifetime, they regarded him as a living god. Usually, they regard the Egyptians, anyways. They would usually regard people as gods when they died, but this was during his lifetime. So he's a really good propagandist, and he made a bunch of these sculptures that if you know a sculpture of ancient Egypt during this period, yeah, he probably had a part in that. His territory in Egypt went from as north as Levant, so modern day Israel, to all the way south to Nubia, which is modern day Sudan. And he made lots of alliances during his later years. And this would be literally the peak of ancient Egypt, especially in the New Egyptian period, which is in between the Old Egyptian period, uh, which would be like 3000 BC, to where Cleopatra, which would be, I want to say 70 BC. But back to the poem itself. The poem itself is about power and how power doesn't last forever. You know, Ramses II, at this time, everybody thought that he never lost a battle because his propaganda was so good. Like it convinced the British people of 1818 that yeah, this guy didn't lose a battle, and that this guy was very good. Which he was an amazing monarch, but never lost a battle. No, not true. Um, but yeah, power doesn't last forever. That's essentially the entire thing. And despite the title of King of Kings, which he never had, that's a Persian title. The same Persian Empire who would eventually invade the Greek city-states. You know, battle Thermopylae. So they thought he was like as powerful as ancient Persia was at his length, the same Persia that Alexander the Great would conquer. But, you know, all of it's gone. You just see sand. You see sand and basically a plaque. Which does give me to think, you know, if we apply that, because I agree with this 100%. Because you think back, and 100 years ago, the British Empire was the most powerful nation on earth. The British people would have never expected uh, the British Navy to be outclassed by modern day America's Navy. You know, because the most powerful nation on earth today is without a doubt the United States of America. That's not propaganda, it's just fact. Um, and it does give me to think on what is all this for? You know, just powerful nations in general, where we have this power, but you know, it's all going to be gone eventually. That just leads me to the conclusion that powerful nations should, you know, try and uplift their citizens, and essentially kind of be like ancient Rome, where I mean, yeah, their power didn't last forever, but everybody in every nation, except for Islamic nations, because they've had a rough history with each other, um, where everybody is amazed by the Romans and how they built cities and how their citizens prospered to the point where a citizen in ancient Rome had more benefits than the average citizen in the medieval ages. Like that's a nation you would want to help the world, to help your citizens, and so that people in history can go, yeah, that's a nation that I want my nation to be. You know, that's just the conclusion I get from this. But at the end of the day, you should come up with your own conclusion. You know, what do you think about this poem? But yeah, so the main video is over, so if you want to end this, that's okay with me. But I have to thank Girl Gamer Sam. Uh she uh she made a short of my video, which honestly I thank her. I'm terrible at thanking people, but yes, I I appreciate that. And I also want people to go and subscribe to a friend of mine named Buddy Butt, who is trying to reach 50 subs. I doubt this will help that much, but he's trying to reach 50 subs so that he can stream video games. Personally, I like video games when I'm not reading. I should read more. But, you know, I just want to give those two a shout out and support and thank them. But yeah, you guys have a good day.